All right, today we are diving deep into something called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI for short. And trust me, it's a tool that might just completely change how you see yourself and, well, everyone around you. So let's get right into it.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're just not on the same wavelength as everyone else? Like you think differently, you react differently. You just see the world through a completely unique lens. And in those moments, maybe you've even had that little thought creep in. Is something wrong with me?
Well, what if I told you there's a system out there designed not to stick you in a box, but to actually help you understand why you are the way you are? Think of it like a map to your own inner world.
And this really gets at a question that, we all ask ourselves at some point, why am I like this? So many of us grow up kind of comparing ourselves to other people, thinking maybe we're falling short somewhere.
But here's the big idea, the most crucial part of all of this. You are not less, you are simply different. And when you can really, truly get a handle on that difference, you can stop fighting against your own nature and start working with your natural strengths. And that, right there, is the real power behind a framework like MBTI.
So where did this whole map even come from? It's not something that just appeared out of thin air. To get it, we need to hop in a time machine for a second. It all really kicked off with the famous psychologist Carl Jung. He started noticing that human behavior wasn't nearly as random as it seemed. In fact, it followed some really clear patterns. Then, inspired by his theories, a mother-daughter team, Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers, decided they wanted to make these ideas useful for everybody. They took Jung's complex work and turned it into the practical, accessible tool that literally millions of people use today. Okay, so how does this thing actually work? Well, the MBTI is built on 4 key preferences. And it's not about how smart you are or what you're good at. It's all about what feels most natural to you. Think of it like being right-handed or left-handed. Both hands can write, right? But one just feels easier, more natural. That's what we're talking about. The very first preference is all about your energy. Just think about it for a second. After a really long, draining week, what do you do to recharge your batteries? If your answer is something like curling up with a good book or just having some quiet time to yourself, you probably have a preference for introversion. But if you feel most alive and energized when you're out with a group of people, you likely lean towards extroversion. It's really that simple. It's just about where you draw your energy from.
All right, next up. How do you prefer to take in information? When you're faced with a new situation, a new idea, what's the first thing you naturally pay attention to? So, if you have a preference for sensing, you tend to focus on the concrete facts and details, what's real, what's tangible, what's happening right now. But if you have a preference for intuition, you're probably more drawn to the patterns, the possibilities, the big picture, what could be. Here's a great example. Imagine you're looking at a painting. A sensor might notice the specific colors, the texture, the brush strokes. An intuitive, on the other hand, is probably going to focus more on the overall mood, the symbolism, and what the artist was trying to say. See the difference? The third dimension we're looking at is your decision-making style. So once you've got all that information, how do you actually go about making a choice? A thinking preference means you tend to prioritize logic, objectivity, and consistency. You kind of step back from the situation to find the most logical, impersonal truth. A feeling preference, on the other hand, means you prioritize harmony, your personal values, and how the decision is going to impact other people. You actually step into the situation to weigh what feels right. And finally, our fourth preference describes your preferred lifestyle. How do you like to live your life and deal with the world around you? Now, if you have a judging preference, and this is a big one because that word can throw people off, it does not mean you're judgmental. It just means you prefer your life to be organized and structured. You feel better once a decision is made, you love a good plan. But if you have a perceiving preference, you probably prefer a more flexible, spontaneous life. You like to keep your options open, and you're comfortable adapting on the fly. Okay, so we've got these 4 pairs of preferences, right? When you take your natural preference from each one of those 4 categories, you start to build a complete picture of your personality type. And when you mix and match all those preferences, what you end up with is a total of 16 distinct personality types. Each of these types gets a 4-letter code, which is basically a snapshot of your preferences. So for example, you might have an INTJ. That's introverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. People often call them the strategic masterminds because they're driven by logic and have this amazing vision for the future. Or you could have an ESFP, extroverted, sensing, feeling, and perceiving. They're often called the enthusiastic improvisers because they live in the moment and create this fun, energetic vibe for everyone. Now, the goal isn't to memorize all 16 types, but just to see how each combination creates a totally unique set of strengths. Okay, before we wrap this up, I want you to lean in because this is probably the most important thing to remember about all of this. It's absolutely crucial to see this tool for what it is. It's a guide, not a label. Your personality type doesn't define every single thing about you. It's just a starting point for self-awareness, a way to understand your natural tendencies and inclinations. It's not meant to be some rigid box that limits who you can be. And you've got to remember, like any tool, it has its limits. It's not 100% perfect. It doesn't measure your skills or your intelligence or how successful you're going to be. I mean, we're all way too complex and multifaceted for that, right? This is simply one lens, one perspective to help you view yourself a little more clearly. So really, things like the MBTI are all about starting a conversation with yourself. They give you a new language to explore your inner world. So my question to you is, with this map in your hand, what new territories are you going to discover about yourself?
एक कदम विकसित भारत की ओर।